All right. Well, thanks for bearing with us, everybody. Hello and welcome to the inaugural, as you can tell by the technical challenges that we had, Microsoft 365 user group, Train the Trainer. This is an 8-part series that we're going to go into, but before we go into the 8-part series, I really want to just kick off an introduction of what we have found and what we're hoping to accomplish with these lives, and not just about one-to-many or us to the group, the community, communication. It's also trying to foster a genuine user group through this, so that we can eventually get enough momentum and folks participate, where we can learn from each other, help each other solve problems, or just communicate together. So that's our goal. And we really want to try and focus on the business problems we're trying to solve. So we decided that our inaugural session to kick off this user group is really going to be about one of the most common things that we do, one of the most common problems that we see, which is finding and helping coach, train the trainers, if you will, the trainers of your organization. Not necessarily people are designated trainers, but you might ask them to help the champions, the power users, maybe team owners, department heads that are responsible for facilitating team meetings, SharePoint admins, not global admins, not 365 tenant admins, but like we're not talking about really technical. We're really just talking about at the operational level, who might be involved in editing SharePoint sites, managing teams and membership of teams, and other aspects of 365. Those evangelists, champions that we're trying to foster. So this is the place where we're trying to create an environment where those in your organization and across organizations can come and hopefully learn tips and tricks and learn from each other, as well as some content that we share that's valuable, templates, information to help them on their journey of driving adoption and helping improve your organization leverages Microsoft 365 tools. So I want to throw out a challenge, and Stephanie don't even know that I'm going to do this. But one of my favorite aspects of being virtual on meetings is people end up being on mute. So we made mugs. You're on mute. Mugs, so that you can do exactly what I'm doing right now. Holding up to a camera when someone is on mute. You can just have that mug available on your desk, and you just go like this. So. Anyone who I want to get somehow, I don't know if we can track somehow, some way. I want to be able to send these mugs to people. And so if you attend the next session, how about attend the next session? We're gonna send out mugs to everyone who attends. I don't even know how we're gonna do that. Figure it out. I mean, other than the mail. I just want to make sure. I want to give everyone incentive because I love these you're on mute mugs. So you can and people love them, especially when you're in the past, because it happens all the time. So anyway, that's my little plug for the next session, which we're going to do part two of the 8-part series. But with that said, Nina is going to lead us through really the first part of the content that we do in our trainer sessions, which build a foundation. We're not going to go deep for those of you who are like super users. Some of this is going to feel repeat, but the point of this, the frame of mind that we want you to ask you to think about is this is not to assume that people know the capabilities of teams and OneDrive and SharePoint, some of the really foundational basics, because I can tell you that when we work with organizations, I did a session this morning with the group, that these things that Nina's going to cover here, the first part are some of the foundational basics that you cannot assume understand, but yet the building blocks for everything else that you want to be able to do with these tools. So with that said, Nina, I'm excited for you to walk us through this. So let's dig into Train the Trainer Part 1.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. And I just wanted to really briefly kind of pull up our content for the next couple sessions, just without technical difficulties. I'm not sure how much we'll be able to cover today, but we definitely want to just very high-level overview of teams, and it's just another chat app, but there's so much more to that. But there's so much looking at that. So just the chat versus team portion, and if we have the time, we'll have the different channel types. But before we do that, I'd like to hear my tech Steve Harvey quite regularly with start with the end. And so that's what I do is kind of start at the end, just a couple of things, how we our clients do best practices and how to set up teams and SharePoint. And to that end, before I show you our demo environment, I think one thing that I find a lot of clients confusing is they confusing. Where do my files live now? Do my files live now in my environment? And again, to assume. So I just want to quickly touch on those kind of buckets, if you will, and show you our demo environment, and how we see our clients, and what's best practice in our world. Best practice in our world. But just really quickly, just really looking at those documents that are generally private to you, your personal, you think of the My Docs, think of the My Docs in your file server environment, in 365 worlds, those in your OneDrive. So they're private to you. Yes, you can share them out with others, but typically you would have to set that up. By default, that is private to you. Team files. If you think of your department files, typically living in a shared drive server right now. Finance team, marketing team, HR team. Those files we would typically set up in Teams, and we're going to look at in a lot more detail how we typically do that. And then you have your organization-wide files. So in our team, maybe they're in draw format, we're collaborating with others, but at some point, those are going to become a final published version we want to share across various departments, across the organization. They've oftentimes read only. We don't really want people messing with them anymore, or making any changes. And those would then live in my SharePoint communication site. So I just want to show you a little bit of what that looks like in our world. So if we look here at the Teams, Microsoft Teams, and the Teams portion of Teams, because we always joke apparently Microsoft ran out of names there. How we set this up is we would like to mirror your organizational design. We don't want to create a team that's not going to persist. So I don't want to create a team for the office picnic party or office party or something like that. That just creates team sprawl at the end of the day, and before you know it, I heard from another client the other day, he's part of 200 teams. Yeah, that's not ideal. So that's not a world we want to live in. So we would want to mirror your organizational design here. Some clients that I work with also work with really large projects that persist over a long period of time. So that would be another use case for creating a team. In here, if I look at, say, my marketing team, there's three real big categories here of ways that we mimic your team activities. So communication, collaboration, and productivity. So posts here is where I could communicate with everybody inside of my team. I can share files here, collaborate with my team. Some of those issues that we have with on-prem file servers, like not being, getting locked out of documents and those types of things, not really an issue here with cloud computing. I just want to quickly touch on a couple other things that are really great opportunities for your team. Not to say you have to set up your team in this way, but for example, we leverage the OneNote workbook that we get with our team. Instead of emailing those agendas and minutes, and by the time you're done, you don't know which of the 5 emails has the most up-to-date information in there. We internally at MyTech do this as well. We use our OneNote workbook to track our agendas and minutes. So when I come in here, I know it's the most up-to-date information. Some other opportunities and ways that we use it as well is leveraging Microsoft Planner. So we can see as a team what tasks are coming, who's assigned to it, what those timelines look like. We also use Microsoft Lists. So for example, for items that we don't want to forget, but maybe we're not quite ready to address them just yet, we want to have a parking board where we can keep track of that and know that we will get that at some point. Then using Microsoft Forms, we could use it for training requests, for rating the meeting. There's so many different opportunities, quizzes, surveys, polls, that type of thing. So just a quick little taster of what potentially you could integrate into your team's environment as well. I think Nate would agree with what we're seeing is that Microsoft Teams is really becoming that one-stop shop where as much as possible, we want to have one world, one dashboard for people to live in. I'm going to head over really quickly to the SharePoint intranet side. So as I was saying earlier, there's the collaborative, internal, departmental type files, but then there's the files that you want to share across your organization. A very typical use case of this is HR, for example. So things like policies and procedures, new employee onboarding, that type of thing. Marketing is another big use case that we see where we're wanting to share maybe PowerPoint templates, letterheads, logos, all kinds of marketing and sales collateral there as well. As you can probably see, one best practice that I would recommend here is incorporating that SharePoint intranet right here in your Microsoft Teams app. It just makes it so much easier for people to access. Another thing that you'll probably notice is that we're very specific about how we set up navigation. It's a really big roadblock that we've seen with SharePoint. Typically for a lot of SharePoint clients that we've seen, if you go in here to the SharePoint app portion, it kind of looks like that, very messy, not very user-friendly. So yeah, that's definitely one thing that we'll be looking at here during these sessions is how do we make this really as easy as possible with the fewest clicks possible for our users to get to the information that they need. So that was a really quick high-level flyover as to what we will build towards and things that we'll be looking at during these sessions. But with that, I think what I'm going to do is just dig into today's session, which is what is really the difference between chat and the Teams portion of Teams. One thing I do often see is that the chat portion is very well utilized, but the Teams portion maybe not so much. I have a little demonstration here that I can show you. So if we think about how we communicate and collaborate on a day-to-day basis at our jobs, we often have one-on-one or small group conversations. I kind of call that our water cooler conversations. They're private with that person. It's very ad hoc. I just want to reach out to Nate and quickly ask a question and then it's over. The other side of that is that I sometimes need to communicate and collaborate as a team or a group or a department. So meetings in there, sharing files, collaborating on files. So if we think of the ways that we communicate and collaborate and we look at that as to how that relates to Microsoft Teams, those one-on-one small group type of conversations would typically live in a chat. For example, what I alluded to earlier with the company picnic, for example, the Christmas party. That could happen in a one-on-one chat or a small group chat. I don't need to go and create a team for that because that means I'm in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to have to archive or delete that team, and it just causes a whole bunch of confusion. But for a team, group, department, or a really big project that persists, I would want to create a team and then add members to that team, and we'll look at that in more detail. So yeah, I'm going to hop over here to the chat. So how do I start a new chat? I want to quickly reach out to Nate. So this little button up here with a little pencil. I'm going to type his name in here. Hi there. So this is obviously private to Nate, only Nate can see it. If I feel like, wow, this typing thing is taking forever, I can quickly reach out with a call or a video, which is something I'll often do. Just, hey, it's just easier if I just quickly do a video call and ask you the question directly. So I find that super useful. I might now, as we're having this discussion, we use a company picnic again as an example, decide I actually want to add Stephanie to this conversation as well. So this little button up here, top right with the people and the plus sign, I am going to add in Stephanie. There you go. So again, for that, I can create that small group. Let's go add one more person just for fun. We will add, and watch what happens when I add another person in here. This is kind of a key thing because I hear that all the time. Like when I add somebody to the group, what are they going to be able to see? So I actually have three options here. I could say don't include them in the chat history if I don't want them, or maybe there's a lot of information, I don't want to overwhelm them. I'll just say, don't include it. I could say, well, let's include history from the past 1 or 2 or 5 or however many days, or include them in all the chat history. So I'm just going to include him in all of it. Say add. All right. Because we've previously added people to this group, you'll notice that the group name has been changed. But if it just had the people in the group there, that little pencil is a great way to change the name of the group to something that makes a little bit more sense. So let's say we're going to change this to the Christmas party, and I'm going to save it. Now, one thing that I like to do if I know this conversation is going to continue for a couple days is to go ahead to the three little dots over there. We call those the breadcrumbs, by the way. A lot of food uh, analogies here. So I'm going to references exactly. So I'm going to hit the little breadcrumbs, and then I'm going to say I want to pin it. So as Nate and I have realized, we've run into this before. We can pin up to 15 chats there. But I like having that there so that it's top of mind, easy to access. And then when that conversation is over, I can just head back in there, hit the breadcrumbs, and then unpin it again. The other useful feature here, sometimes things get a little bit noisy in the group and there's jokes kind of happening back and forth, and maybe I'm on a call or I'm in a meeting. So I do tend to use the mute option quite regularly. A couple things here with the chat bar down here. If I use the little A with a pencil, I get some formatting options. Those are pretty useful if I want to do numbered lists or bullets or change the formatting at all. The second button here, I can make it important or urgent, kind of similar to setting an email to urgent as well. I can attach something here. I can add in an emoji or a GIF or whatever it is. So a lot of fun things here to play with. I don't generally want to dig into the chat too much because I must say that a lot of people that attend these training have probably done something similar in other chat apps before. One thing that I do want to highlight really quickly is recently Microsoft have added scheduled sends to chats, which we find super useful. So if you want to send somebody a message, but maybe it's after hours and you're kind of worried you're going to bug them, if you right click on the send button down here, you'll see that you have the option to schedule it for a specific date and time. Obviously, if you want to send it at midnight and show what a hard worker you are, I'll leave that to you to decide. One last thing that I want to show here with the group chat, it's kind of counterintuitive, but if I want to leave the chat, I would go back to this button up here and then hit the leave button. So just remember that it will say so in the status update down here. So if you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, just let them know you're leaving the chat. So just one quick tip there. Anything else in the chat? Oh yeah, I was going to ask you.
Because like if I'm reading an article at night or something and I'm like, hey, I want to share this, so I'm on my mobile phone as opposed to on my laptop or desktop, and so you can do the same thing, scheduled send, by holding the send button on your mobile, and then it pops up. Instead of just clicking it, if you hold it, it actually pops up the ability to schedule send. So I was struggling with that too, because I was like, oh, I can only schedule send on my laptop, but you can actually do it on mobile too, and it works really well. So it's a huge feature that I strongly recommend, so you're not bugging people at night.
Oh, I haven't tried it on my mobile yet, so thanks for the tip. All right, so I'm going to head over to the really important part of Teams, which is the Teams portion of Teams. As you can see, the way we've set it up in our demo environment is to mirror our departments, so finance, security, HR, marketing, all of that. A couple things with how we set up teams as well. Once you start adding members to that team, everybody in that team will have read-write access to all of the content into the team. So that's really important to know. If I'm not a member of that team, I won't even see it on the list. So that's kind of a really great way that we can manage people's access. Teams have two major roles. If I go here to the breadcrumbs and I go to manage team, press the wrong button there, manage team. And you can see here that there are owners, members, and guests. And those are kind of the built-in permissions with Microsoft Teams. I really just quickly want to touch on kind of what those responsibilities are. So owners, have all the power, which is one thing that I want to really emphasize today. If you are rolling out teams with owners, that there's extra training done with owners so that they understand what those responsibilities are. I think that that's something that's kind of overlooked. They really do have the keys to the kingdom. They can do everything in that team. They can add and remove members. They can add guests. They can change team settings. They can add extra channels in there. So if you have a specific change management process in place with who's able to create teams, how they're able to create them, who's able to create additional channels in there, that is definitely something to think about, and understanding what those responsibilities are. Members are the members of the in the team, and they can again, they have read-write access to most of the content. There are some nuances that we'll touch on with channel types, but in a standard channel they will have access to everything, so they can have conversations and collaborate on files. Guests are an important feature in 365. So when I'm working with clients as a MyTech employee, I will ask them to invite me as a guest into their environment. So I will be able to access their files and in that particular team, and also conversations. But there are some limitations with things that I can and cannot do in that team. So it's just important to know that. So I'm going to head back here again. So as you can see, when I create the team, by default, I get a general channel. And no, unfortunately, we cannot change the name. That's kind of what we're stuck with. The general channel really is the catch-all channel, if you will, for conversations, files, etc. You'll hear me say this oftentimes during these sessions, like I believe in less is more. We do not need to create 50 channels to get the job done. So I would be really cautious and really careful about thinking what those channels should be. Let's look at why we would potentially have an additional channel. So HR is a really good use case here. So let's say we do a lot of recruitment in the HR channel. That's very typical. Oftentimes with the recruitment channel or with recruitment, there's a lot of resumes, there's a lot of conversations about the candidates. We don't want to get into a position where we're cluttering up the general channel with all of that information as well. So if there's a lot of content and there's a lot of conversations outside of kind of the general channel, I would say that that would be a good use case for creating a separate channel. So there are essentially 3 types of channels, and I see our time's kind of getting on the low side, so I'm gonna Nate, looks like you wanted to say something there. Okay.
Go on.
All right, cool. I am going to do a real quick pause on kind of the channel types and some of the benefits of the channel types. So by default, the first type of channel is a standard channel. So this general channel, you'll see any channel without any additional icons to it. So like the general channel, the recruitment channel, these are what we call standard channels. So standard channels, very important, are visible by everybody in the team. One quick thing that I want to mention here is I feel like sometimes people get confused with channels and feel like we need to create kind of, if you think about subfolders in like a traditional file server world, it's almost as though people feel they need to create a separate channel for every subfolder. That's not the case. You can build out a folder structure in the general channel under the Files tab as you normally would. Again, only create a separate channel if there really is a lot of content and you want to separate it out. So we do not need a separate channel for every folder. We can build our folder system in one channel. All right, so that's the standard channel. A couple things here with the standard channel. I'm just going to hop back in here again. So I can do Teams meetings in that channel. A standard channel also supports guests. So if you want to invite somebody from outside of your organization, as I showed you earlier, you're able to integrate other apps in there like Planner and Forms, excuse me, lists, etc. Some things that are not supported. So I cannot add, if I want to create a separate channel, I have to be a member of that parent team. In a standard channel, I cannot lock down things. In other words, I cannot limit visibility for certain members of the team, and I cannot share that channel with another team. So just a couple things to know about a standard channel. So let's quickly look at the second type of channel, and that is what we call a private channel. So in this HR team use case, let's say we have a payroll section and there's some confidential information in there that I only want to have the HR manager and the payroll manager to have access to. So what I could do is create a private payroll channel that's only visible to those two managers. Now, if you haven't been added into a private channel, you're not able to see it at all. It won't even pop up on the list, which is again why those team owners have a really big responsibility and why we will lock that down for team members. Because we've noticed before, we've seen team members just being allowed to do whatever they wanted to, and they were creating 10, 15 private channels that the managers had no visibility into. So we'll talk about how we would lock that down as well. So private channel, just going to go in here. So in our HR example, we're going to lock that down for only 2 people in that team. So things to know there, feature-wise, is it's a great way to lock things down and limit visibility. It also supports guest access. So if you have an external person in that team and you want them to have only visibility into that private channel, that is supported. Unfortunately, as of doing this session today, we're not able to pull in 365 apps into a private channel the way I showed you earlier with Planner and Forms. You also, and this is a very key thing to know, if you want to be a member of that private channel, you have to be a member of the parent team. Also, we're not able to share that private channel with other team members outside of our team. Okay, and really quick, the third type of channel, which is a slightly newer type of channel and has been really beneficial for cross collaboration across various teams, is a shared channel. So in our use case, we have 2 separate teams. We have a marketing team and we have a sales team. The marketing team is constantly working on marketing collateral that they want to collaborate with the sales team. And before shared channels came around, we had to invite all of the salespeople into the marketing team so that they could access those documents. Now, that's not an issue anymore. We can still keep those team members in their separate teams, but use a shared channel to create a bridge essentially between those 2 teams. So if we're looking at those features here, one of the great things with this is you do not have to be a part of the marketing team to collaborate with the marketing team. We can use the shared channel to do that. So we can limit that team because we can share from one full team to another team. We can share with individuals across, and we can share with up to 50 other teams. So there's a lot of flexibility there. It's not, unfortunately, guest access is not supported in a shared channel, so I cannot invite external people into a shared channel. And again, 365 apps are not supported. So kind of a mouthful right there.
There's a couple of the things that I like to illustrate, and also team types. They're related, but slightly different. And I think to this conversation. So one, and if you were to go to the HR team and hit add a channel, just to give the example of being able to do that. That's how you add the channel. But when your pop-up window comes up here, this is when you can specify the kind of channel it is. You cannot change the type of channel after it's been created. You have to choose it here, because one of the reasons I mentioned that there's certain things that aren't supported is because it creates a different security group, it creates a different SharePoint site, it does a bunch of things behind the scenes that you can't change after it's done. If you make it a private and you really wanted to make it a standard or vice versa, you basically have to delete it and start over. So that's one of the things I like to mention about channels. But contrary to that, which I do like to do an honorable mention about teams, because there's team types as well. So Nina, if you wouldn't mind going to the HR channel and hitting on edit team, hit the breadcrumbs and hit edit team. There's different types of teams, and an example, because one of our clients at one time came to us and said, most teams, I think, are set as private teams, meaning you have to be invited in or assigned into the group or into the team. But we had a client one time that had what they thought was a private team. They wanted it was just like the HR team, let's say, using this example. And then all of a sudden, people that weren't on the HR team were members of the team. and it's because they had the team set to public, if you notice that, where anyone in your organization can join versus having to be private where you have to be added in. And so it was a simple change. You didn't have to delete the team and restart the team or recreate the team like you'd have to do with the channel. You could actually go here and then just change the team from public to private. The other thing that I like to illustrate is that most every organization that we work with has an org-wide team, like an all organization team. And one of the things we recommend is setting it to that last one, which means every single time someone joins or leaves your organization, they will automatically add it or removed to the org-wide team. So you don't have to remember to manually add them if you're the owner of that team. So those are just a couple things I like to identify between team types, and you can edit those after they're created, versus channel types where you can't edit them after they're created. So interesting little nuances about teams and channels that we like to touch on as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And with our time kind of running out, I just wanted to quickly touch on some of the differences between how we chat in the chat portion and how we have a conversation that's visible to the whole team in the Teams portion of Teams. So one quick public service announcement here, depending on whether you're in public preview or not. I don't know, for those of you who've worked in Teams for a while and you were always looking for the latest message at the bottom of the screen, that's now been turned on its head literally. And it's now at the top, which is kind of messing with my head. I don't know about you, Nate, but it's been kind of interesting to get used to. But anyway,
yeah, I don't like
yeah,
but
I don't like it either.
It's coming. You're gonna have to deal with it. So yeah, it's definitely. I don't know why they chose to do that, but that's what they did.
So a couple of things that I want to show that's a little bit different. You'll see that the toolbar is different. We don't have the kind of the chat toolbar. We have either a post or announcement. So I'm going to go, you could just do a post, which would have a subject line and some of the formatting options that you probably saw in the chat portion. Or we could say, I want to do an announcement if we really want to make it kind of obvious. So I am going to say here, please review annual benefits. For all staff, there's a little heading in here, and I could type a message. I could also use my @mention here. So I could @mention either individuals in the team, or I can @mention the entire team. So I'm going to @mention Peter and say, please review paragraph 1. I also want to add in an attachment here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the paperclip, and I'm going to attach my cloud files. Let's hope I actually have files in the HR team. We'll find out soon enough. Okay, let's just use this one, and I'm going to go ahead and attach it. Okay. And then I'm going to post. So this means, because it's in my general channel, everybody in the team is going to see it. So what's really great about this is I could get everybody to reply to that specific topic or thread. So if I go ahead and hit the reply button there, we do call that out, because what I have seen is somebody posts something like this, and then somebody creates a new post saying, hey, that looks great, but because it's not attached to that specific post with a reply, nobody knows what on earth that person's referring to. So just wanted to kind of mention that there. One of the overlooked little options up here is just a little thumbs up. So olden days, we had to say, dear so-and-so, in an email, we saw your email, thank you, send. This is just so much quicker. Just hit the little thumbs up over there, and just to show that that post has been seen. Okay. One other quick thing that I want to show here is the kind of the integration really with Teams and with Outlook. So you know how you have that small contingent in your organization that are like, I've been using Outlook for the last 20 years. You're not going to make me change now. So here's like a little sneaky tip for those of you who are trying to get people to adopt Teams. Instead of redoing that message with the attachment and doing it in Outlook, we have the option here to share to Outlook. It does take a little spinny wheel here, usually in my demo department, every time I do this. But the nice thing about it is I don't have to copy and paste that message. It will just put that into the body of an email for me. I could just type in the person's name or the distribution list. And kind of sneaky down here is a little link that says go to Teams. So when they open it up their side in Outlook and they hit the go to Teams, it will bring them into Teams and show them the message there. Same thing going from Outlook So I'm going to go here into my Outlook, and you'll see I get it over here. Of course, on mine, I'm not seeing it right now. There we go. It's just too small. I have the option. There's a little Teams button in the email, and I could share that email with an attachment if necessary into my Teams environment too. So really useful.
Like to illustrate is that, that came from the HR team, which only has a few people a part of it. So if you actually sent that email to someone outside of the HR team, they could get the email, but the link to go to the team, if they're not a member of that team, wouldn't work. So there's some of the nuances that you have to be, aware of when you do that. So that's where the org-wide team might come into play, or like an announcements channel or something like that, that's part of the org-wide team. If you're trying to send, like, especially for open enrollment, hey, you're going to send that to everybody, right? So, but that's definitely ways. So there are some security nuances to be aware of when you're doing that, because you can't just post it in the HR team and then share it via email outside of the HR team. That won't work.
Mm-hmm. Just from a structural point, there's just something that I want to highlight here really quickly, because I have had a couple of people tell me, oh, yeah, we use Teams, but we don't use SharePoint. And so I just want to touch on kind of what that integration is between Teams and SharePoint, and how they are just absolutely linked to one another, and there's no two ways about it. So when I create a team in Microsoft Teams, what will happen is Microsoft or 365 will create a SharePoint team site in the back end automatically with a whole lot of other collateral, a OneNote workbook, a group calendar, etc. So I can show you really quickly what that looks like. So if I go here to the Files tab up here, you'll see I have the option to open in SharePoint. And you'll see it says here, My Tech HR Team. It has the little Teams icon, and it's the same documents that you saw on the team side. So the way we like to say it is that it's essentially two doors to the same stuff. So whether you're accessing it from the Teams portion, some clients I work with are a little bit more comfortable with SharePoint, and so they like to access it this way. It's still the same content. So that's kind of what's happening in the background when you're creating a team, and how the two are connected to one another, because the content needs to live somewhere. So your SharePoint team site is essentially your cloud server, if you will, where the content is stored.
With that said, we've covered pretty much everything. Well, we've got lots more, of course. We've got 8 more or 7 more sessions. But this is where we've learned to build the foundation and not assume that even your champions understand some of these nuances. And it's also where we think of this as train the trainers, or these folks. This is not what we would typically train to all your end users. This is what we train to the folks that are supposed to help figure out how these environment and these tools can work best for you. So that's why we go into a little bit more structural conversations, a little bit more back-end understanding, so that you are equipped to be able to help advise and guide your organization make some of these decisions about how you might want to use these tools moving forward. That's not how we necessarily recommend training the end users, because sometimes getting into that structure, going too deep, can actually create confusion versus clarity. But with that said, session 1 kind of in the books, other than opening up for some brief Q&A to see if there's any questions in the comments or any other nuance that we want to try and cover before we sign off here shortly. All right, very good. Well, one of the things that I always like to add is have something in my back pocket, just in case it takes a little bit of time to get any comments coming through. And if there's nothing after this, then we'll adjourn. I do find that, Nina, one of the things that you showed there at the last about the posts, I do like that in the preview, that it automatically, when you hit on new post at the top, it automatically gives you the formatting option. It puts the subject line there. If you're in the old version of Teams, you actually have to hit that little A icon in order to bring up the formatting capabilities. And one of the reasons why I do really like that aspect of this change, because when you're communicating in a team versus in a chat, which is usually a different type of, like you said, it's ad hoc, it's quick, it's not like a conversation. When you're in a team, you're typically creating a conversation and having, like, if you were I like to think of a Teams post like a group email, like if you're using a distribution list, and if you're sending it to a distribution list, like your department or whatever, you would put a subject line in that email if you're using an email. So I think the default to creating, either, and so I like to call that out for those because not a lot of people are on the preview. And so you might see these things at the bottom, but then there's a little A icon that Nina highlighted in the chat section. It shows up in the post section as well. But you have to actually, like here, it'll show that like that in post. It'll actually pull up a formatting option. And when it does that in the team section, actually gives you an option for a subject line. So that's probably one of the most common overlooked items. Even in our organization, it happens. I see someone make a post and they just start doing, it's like a text message, and they don't give context. They don't have a subject line. So it's really hard to organize when you have multiple conversations happening at the same time. It's just hard to kind of keep things organized into a thread, so you can know exactly, to which chat or which context you're replying. So that's one of the things I wanted to keep in the back pocket, because that is a nuance that's different between a post and a chat. It's a subtle detail, but typically when you're doing a conversation, you're going to have a group of people, and being able to organize by subject line or by using the announcement capability is really powerful to help your team not get confused about the conversations they're having with their team. So that was just a back pocket thing in case to kind of prompt any other conversations or questions. Stephanie, anything other pop up? If not, we'll adjourn. All right. Well, Nina, thank you so much for guiding us through the first half of session 1 that we typically go through in a Train the Trainer session. But thanks a lot. We'll join next month. Stay tuned. You'll all get some communication information about that. And don't forget, if you let's get people to it, we'd love to see you, and we'll get you You're on Mute bug as a thank you to help get this user group kicked off, so we can all learn from each other in the future. So signing off from iTech for Train the Trainer session number 1 of our inaugural user group session, and make it a great day.